Breaking news. Silver stackers. Flock largest coin show in USA. The F.U.N. show 2026. What we witnessed there will shake the precious metals market to its core. Dealers running out of inventory within hours, premiums spiking beyond anything we've seen before, and the crowd, thousands, desperately buying silver like there's no tomorrow. But here's what they're not telling you. The real reason behind this frenzy isn't just about collecting coins anymore. Something much bigger is happening. And if you're holding paper assets right now, you need to hear this. Because what unfolded at this show is a warning. Welcome, my friends, to economy growth. You know, I've been following these markets for decades now, and what I'm about to share with you today might be one of the most important updates you'll hear all year. Now, before we dive in, do me a favor, would you? If you value honest economic insights, the kind your financial advisor probably won't tell you, go ahead and hit that subscribe button right there. I know, clicking buttons isn't as easy as it used to be, but trust me, this channel might just help you protect what you've worked your whole life to build. And tell me, where are you watching from today? Texas? Florida? Maybe overseas? Drop your location in the comments. I'd love to know where my fellow truth seekers are tuning in from. Now, let's talk about what's really happening at the F.U.N. show 2026. The doors of the Orange County Convention Center in Orlando had barely opened when chaos erupted. Thousands of people surged forward, their eyes fixed on rows upon rows of gleaming silver and gold. This was the F.U.N. show 2026, and nothing like this had ever been seen before in American coin show history. A line wrapped around the corner of the massive building. People were still piling down the escalators, pushing forward with determination. Dealers stood behind their tables, watching in disbelief as the crowd descended upon them like a tidal wave. This wasn't just another coin show, this was pandemonium. Alex, the owner of Stacker Vault, stood frozen behind his booth. His voice trembled with excitement as he surveyed the scene. "The energy in this room is just wild," he said, shaking his head. "I've never seen anything like this." Within hours, dealers began running out of inventory. Products that had been stacked high in the morning were completely gone by noon. The silver was disappearing faster than anyone could restock it. Alex looked at his empty shelves and realized something profound was happening. "We're completely sold out of a lot of our products," he admitted. "This is unprecedented." But why? What was driving this frenzy? The answer lay in the numbers flashing across screens throughout the convention center. Silver prices had rocketed to $80 per ounce. Just months ago, at $60, dealers couldn't give the metal away. Now, at $80, people were fighting to buy every ounce they could find. Ken, one of the owners of the largest coin shop in America, watched the chaos unfold with knowing eyes. His shop, U.S. Coins out of Houston, specialized in rare collections and bullion. He had seen many markets come and go over the years, but this was different. "It's $60 silver, we couldn't give it away," Ken explained, his voice carrying a mix of irony and vindication. "And at $80 silver, we've got lines out the door." He paused, letting the contradiction sink in. This is a good thing for the industry. It's a good thing for the hobby. Ken had been listening to the stacker community for 7 or 8 years. These were the people who had been preaching about economic collapse, currency debasement, and the inevitable rise of precious metals. For years, mainstream investors had dismissed them as conspiracy theorists and doomsayers. But now, everything they had predicted was coming to pass. All of the rhetoric and things that we heard that they were preaching about are coming true, Ken said with a slight smile. "And I think it's great for the whole hobby." Hayden from SD Bullion stood near the entrance, watching wave after wave of people flood through the doors. He had been coming to the F.U.N. show since he was 12 years old. That was over 20 years of attendance. He had seen busy shows before. He had seen enthusiastic crowds, but nothing compared to this. "There's got to be 1,000+ people waiting in that line to come in," Hayden said, his eyes wide with amazement. "I've never seen anything like this for any U.S. coin show." He had even traveled to the Berlin World Money Fair every year, which attracted massive international crowds. But the line outside in Orlando right now was longer than anything Berlin had ever produced. The public had arrived, and they were hungry. At SD Bullion, the numbers told the story. Record sales, record volume, record demand. The retail public was buying in a way that hadn't been seen in decades. Premiums were starting to spike across the board. Bars, rounds, eagles, everything was moving at prices higher than before. Meanwhile, in another section of the convention center, Trent from Elemental was having conversations that revealed an even deeper problem. Elemental was one of the biggest refiners in America. They were the people who turned scrap silver and sterling into pure bars and rounds. And right now, they were drowning. "It was a market industry issue," Trent explained, rubbing his temples. "Just a backlog of all refiners, whether it be in America, whether it be in Europe and China. We were just backlogged." For weeks, refineries had stopped accepting 90% silver coins and sterling silver. Coin shops across America had been turned away. The system was breaking down under the weight of demand. But the backlog still existed, and with silver prices continuing to climb, it wasn't getting better, it was getting worse. Something strange was happening in the global silver market, and Trent from Elemental was standing right at the epicenter of it all. His refinery, one of the largest in America, had become a bottleneck in a system that was starting to crack under pressure. The numbers were staggering. Silver leasing rates had exploded to 200% for just the daily rollover. That meant banks and institutions were paying double just to borrow silver for a single day. It was a sign of desperation, a sign that physical metal was becoming scarce in places where it mattered most. "There's just so much silver coming back into the market," Trent said, but his expression told a different story. Even though his refinery was investing heavily in new capabilities and equipment, they couldn't keep up. The machines were coming from Asia and Europe, shipped across oceans in a race against time. But time was the one thing they didn't have. It just takes time to get those machines and really ramp things up to a point where we're back to normal, Trent explained. Then he added something chilling, which may not be the case if we get to $100 silver. $100 silver. The words hung in the air like a prophecy. Trent had done a podcast recently where they discussed how scary $70 silver would be for the refining industry. That conversation felt like ancient history now. They were already at $80. The market had blown past every prediction, every worst-case scenario, and it showed no signs of slowing down. The consequences were rippling through the entire supply chain. Coin shops that had always been able to offload their 90% silver and sterling to refineries were now stuck. They had stopped buying from customers because they had nowhere to send the metal. The system that had worked smoothly for decades was seizing up like an engine without oil. "It's one of those stair-step approaches to the market," Trent said, choosing his words carefully. "Especially for us to ramp up manufacturing and producing silver." He paused. "Silver rounds are hot currently right now, even after the holiday rush." The demand wasn't seasonal anymore. It wasn't driven by gift-giving or collector enthusiasm. This was something deeper, something structural. People were converting their dollars into physical metal as fast as refineries could produce it. And Trent's company was caught in the middle, trying to turn raw silver into finished products, while the entire world seemed to want every ounce simultaneously. But here was the truly surprising part. Despite the chaos, despite the shortages, despite the price volatility, sales were booming. "Yes, we are buying more silver now than ever before," Trent confirmed, "but we are also selling more silver than ever before." He had recently spoken with a major online retailer who sold his refinery's products. What they told him seemed almost impossible to believe. They were like, "It is better now than it was during COVID," the retailer had said. Trent hadn't believed it at first. The COVID era had been legendary in precious metals circles. Premiums had skyrocketed. Delivery times had stretched to months. It was the golden age of silver dealing. But this retailer wasn't talking about dollar amounts or gross revenue. They were talking about pure ounces, pure volume, pure customer count. More people were buying more silver right now than during the height of the pandemic frenzy. Even more fascinating was who these buyers were. The demographic was shifting. Younger faces filled the convention floor. People in their 20s and 30s were casting and pouring their own silver. They were the ones hunched over dealer tables inspecting rounds and bars with intense focus. "Our demographic is growing and being younger and hungry," Trent observed. "They want these things. They want cool products. They want to invest and see the value of investing in silver and gold compared to the US dollar." This wasn't their grandparents' coin collecting hobby anymore. This was a youth movement, a generational shift in how young people viewed money, savings, and financial security. They had grown up watching quantitative easing, bank bailouts, and inflation erode purchasing power. They had seen their parents' retirement accounts swing wildly with stock market volatility, and they wanted something different, something tangible, something real. Silver represented an escape hatch from a financial system they no longer trusted. Back on the convention floor, International Stacker was weaving through the crowds, camera in hand. He had been to the F.U.N. show twice before, but this was different. This was electric. "I'm smelling a bit of silver frenzy in the air," he said, grinning. "Or maybe silver lust. I don't know if we have more buyers or sellers, but there's a lot of people and they are locked in. They're focused. Something big is happening here at F.U.N. 2026. The question that nobody wanted to ask out loud was simple but terrifying. What happens next? Trent had been honest about his uncertainty. "I don't know what's happening. I don't know what's going to happen in the market," he admitted. But then he added something that sent chills down the spines of anyone listening. $100 silver seems certainly possible. In one corner of the F.U.N. show, Isaac from Premier Rare Coins was carefully unwrapping something extraordinary. His hands moved with reverence as he revealed a golden coin that looked like it had been touched by history itself. This wasn't just another piece of metal. This was a portal to the past. The coin gleamed under the convention center lights. An 8 escudo, the largest gold coin ever produced by the Spanish Empire during the 1600s and 1700s. This was the very foundation upon which the American dollar and monetary system had been built centuries ago. This here is very special because it's in very good condition, Isaac explained, his voice dropping to almost a whisper. Full date of 1714. But the date wasn't what made this coin priceless. It was where the coin came from. This 8 escudo had been salvaged from the 1715 fleet, a collection of Spanish treasure ships that sank right off the coast of Florida during a hurricane over 300 years ago. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. The fleet was called the 1715 fleet because the latest dated coins found in the wreck were from that year. Only 3 or 4 coins from that entire shipwreck had discernible dates of 1715. And this coin? It was minted just 1 year before the ships went down, made within 365 days of the disaster. Now, this coin shouldn't exist, Isaac said, shaking his head slowly. There's less than 4,008 escudos certified by NGC total. Subtract the amount that were on shipwrecks. Subtract the amount from this particular shipwreck. Then subtract the ones that actually have a visible date, let alone this clear. The price tag? $60,000 for a single gold coin. It was a stunning reminder that while thousands of people were flooding the convention center to buy affordable silver rounds and bars, another world existed in parallel. A world where coins weren't measured by their metal content, but by their rarity, their history, their story. Greg from Heritage Auctions understood this world better than almost anyone. As president of one of the biggest auction houses on the planet, he had handled some of the most valuable coins ever to change hands. And right now, even he was impressed by the energy coursing through the convention center. The coin market is incredibly strong, Greg observed, watching the crowd surge past. It's being driven, of course, in part by the gold and silver prices, which have made interest in gold and silver coins just that much more interesting. Heritage Auctions dealt with the creme de la creme of numismatics, the best of the best. And in their current sale, they had something truly legendary, an 1804 silver dollar. This wasn't just rare, this was mythical. This was a coin that collectors dreamed about but rarely ever saw. Greg's company had handled this particular coin more than 5 times over the years. Each time it came up for auction, it commanded breathtaking prices. This time, it will probably bring between $2 and $3 million, Greg said casually, as if discussing the price of a used car. For just that one coin. $2 to $3 million for a single silver dollar. The contrast was dizzying. Just a few tables away, people were excitedly buying 1-ounce silver rounds for $30 or $40. And here, in the rarefied air of high-end numismatics, a coin was about to sell for millions. But Greg's attention wasn't just on the ultra-rare specimens. He was watching the broader market dynamics with keen interest. The F.U.N. show always performed well because it came right after the end-of-year bonuses, profit distributions, and tax planning. People arrived with fresh money, ready to spend on their hobbies and passions. We see some of the very best coins trade hands at the F.U.N. show every year, Greg noted. But this year felt different. The sheer volume of people, the intensity of the buying, the premiums being paid, it all pointed to something larger than just seasonal enthusiasm. When asked about where gold and silver prices might be headed, Greg's response was measured but revealing. I have no idea, he admitted honestly. I just know that with instability in the world and the economic situations, it looks like a lot of other countries would rather hold gold than US dollars. That was the key insight. Central banks around the globe were diversifying away from dollar reserves. They were buying physical gold in quantities not seen in generations. And if that trend continued, Greg didn't see the price pressure letting up anytime soon. Meanwhile, Dickie, known as the Libertad King of the East Coast, was showcasing his own slice of precious metals obsession. In his hand sat a 2025 1-ounce silver Libertad in brilliant uncirculated condition. The mintage? Only 500 pieces. This is the rarest of all the 1-ounce silver Libertads, Dickie explained with pride. The price? $10,000 for a single ounce of silver. It was another mind-bending example of how rarity and demand could transform a simple ounce of metal into something worth more than 100 times its weight in silver. The same ounce that might cost $80 as a generic round could command $10,000 when it carried the right pedigree, the right mintage, the right story. When asked about his personal favorite, Dickie didn't hesitate. Silver 91 Type 2, he said with the certainty of a true collector. Joe from Beantown Coins had seen a lot in his years as a dealer. He was one of the few true generalists left in the business, someone who dealt in every corner of numismatics without prejudice. Tokens, metals, world coins, ancients, paper money, US coins. If it had value in history, Joe bought and sold it. But even for someone with his experience, this F.U.N. show was unlike anything he had witnessed before. Over 700 dealer tables filled the convention center floor. He had never seen that many at a fun show. 600 was common. 700? That was unprecedented. This is probably the busiest and biggest it's ever been, Joe said, surveying the packed aisles. And the crowd was still growing. Outside, people were still lined up, waiting for their chance to get inside. When asked about his personal collecting passion, Joe's eyes lit up. "I jam on ancients," he said with genuine enthusiasm. "You get so much more history for your buck." There was something magical about holding a coin that was 2,000 years old. Something that connected you directly to emperors, merchants, and ordinary people who had held that same piece of metal millennia ago. But Joe wasn't just a nostalgic collector. He was also a sharp market analyst. And when pressed about where gold and silver prices might be heading, he offered something rare in the precious metals world, a specific warning. "I think gold will continue to rise slowly over the course of the next year," Joe began carefully, "and silver will outperform it, probably by a pretty wide margin." But then came the crucial caveat, the warning that separated wise investors from greedy ones. Joe from Beantown Coins had seen a lot in his years as a dealer. He was one of the few true generalists left in the business, someone who dealt in every corner of numismatics without prejudice. Tokens, metals, world coins, ancients, paper money, U.S. coins. If it had value in history, Joe bought and sold it. But even for someone with his experience, this F.U.N. show was unlike anything he had witnessed before. Over 700 dealer tables filled the convention center floor. He had never seen that many at a fun show. 600 was common. 700? That was unprecedented. "This is probably the busiest and biggest it's ever been," Joe said, surveying the packed aisles. And the crowd was still growing. Outside, people were still lined up, waiting for their chance to get inside. When asked about his personal collecting passion, Joe's eyes lit up. "I jam on ancients," he said with genuine enthusiasm. "You get so much more history for your buck." There was something magical about holding a coin that was 2,000 years old. Something that connected you directly to emperors, merchants, and ordinary people who had held that same piece of metal millennia ago. But Joe wasn't just a nostalgic collector. He was also a sharp market analyst. And when pressed about where gold and silver prices might be heading, he offered something rare in the precious metals world, a specific warning. "I think gold will continue to rise slowly over the course of the next year," Joe began carefully, "and silver will outperform it, probably by a pretty wide margin." But then came the crucial caveat, the warning that separated wise investors from greedy ones. But the real shortage was in something else entirely. Sigma metalytics verifiers. These handheld devices allowed buyers to test the authenticity of precious metals without drilling or damaging the coins. In a market flooded with new buyers and rising prices, the fear of counterfeits was at an all-time high. Everyone wanted a Sigma verifier. As Sigma's largest global distributor, I can say for the first time in history, we are completely sold out, Alex announced. We are back-ordered 4 to 8 weeks on any new orders. 4 to 8 weeks. That meant someone ordering a verifier today wouldn't receive it until well into spring. The demand was that intense. Huge demand, a lot of influx of new customers coming into this market, and a lot of new money, Alex explained. The unprecedented attendance at the Winter Fun Show was driving everything. The demand, the price action, the urgency. As the convention day wore on, one thing became crystal clear to everyone walking those packed aisles. Something fundamental had shifted in the precious metals market. This wasn't just a spike. This wasn't just momentum trading or speculation. Young people were buying physical silver with money they could have put into cryptocurrencies or stocks. Refineries were backlogged despite running at maximum capacity. Dealers were selling out despite record inventory. Premiums were rising despite higher prices. And countries around the world were choosing gold over dollars in their reserve accounts. The signs were everywhere. The question was whether this was the beginning of a new era or the final blow-off top before a devastating correction. Standing in the middle of the F.U.N. show floor, surrounded by thousands of people clutching their newly purchased silver and gold, one thing was certain. The crowd believed the former. They believed this was just the beginning, and whether they were right or wrong would determine the financial fate of an entire generation of stackers who had bet everything on one simple idea, that real money always wins in the end. The convention continued buzzing with energy as the sun set over Orlando. Tomorrow, the doors would open again, and the lines would form again, and the silver would disappear again. Because at $80 per ounce, with $100 clearly in sight, nobody wanted to be left behind when the music finally stopped.